We will undertake this task as rapidly as possible in order to make sure that we're dealing with the sheer volume of this in a responsible way, and we'll conclude it as soon as we can and get those released publicly.
We are in one of those news-feeding frenzies where almost every hour or so a new development hits with regard to the Hillary Clinton email mess. From private servers to various laws that may or may not have been broken, and how the White House fits into all this. All right, let's get some serious explanation. Welcome back to MidPoint, the former chief U.S. attorney for New York and the author of Faceless Execution, Building the Political Case for Obama's Impeachment. Andrew McCarthy joins us. Andrew, good to see you again.
Nice to be here.
Please tell us right off the bat what laws that Mrs. Clinton allegedly broke.
Well, there's a regulatory provision, which is the federal records law. I call it regulatory. It's not to suggest that it's a regulation, but just to say basically it's a guideline that doesn't have any real penalties, but directs that government business be conducted over government facilities. There are also a couple of penal laws that may factor in here. One is the federal embezzlement statute. Embezzlement is a concept that normally just applies to money, but in the case of the federal provision, it actually envelops government records as well. And there's another record-keeping provision as well, which has a 3-year penalty if you violate it, and also the possibility of being disqualified for a future federal office. So they're fairly serious provisions.
What about the pushback from the Clinton people who say that, wait a minute, we've had other people who've done this before. We've had Colin Powell who's done this. Jeb Bush has done this. Other people have had this before. Why are you then holding us to scrutiny?
Well, a couple of things about that. First of all, to point to other lawbreakers as a defense doesn't really help. So even if those people were guilty of the laws, that wouldn't make Hillary not guilty.
Isn't that just a dodge more than anything else, Andrew? Really, at that point?
Well, yeah, it really actually is. Because I don't see what Jeb Bush has to do with it at all, because he was governor of Florida and federal law was irrelevant with respect to him. And with respect to Powell, first of all, there's no evidence that he systematically evaded the federal records-keeping requirement, which is what Mrs. Clinton did. And also, the law that Mrs. Clinton had to follow was actually updated during the Obama administration in a way that didn't apply to Powell. So legally, it's nonsense, but I guess it makes for a good talking point.
Isn't a key word there when you said systematically? Because that would then show the intent?
Yeah, the only logical reason to do this is, and let's think about what she did here. She set up not only private email accounts, which almost everybody in government has, and probably everybody in private industry by now has, but she also set up servers in her own home. And the idea was to have a system that would enable her, under all circumstances, to do what, by the way, she admonished State Department employees that they could not do, which is conduct their business outside the regular chain of communications of the government. And you're quite right. She did it in a systematic way to avoid any scrutiny, which is very different from, say, a federal official who is in the middle of, some crisis and dashes off an email. And the law actually anticipates that and says that that's okay to do, provided that you make a record within 60 days that makes that email a permanent part of the government record keeping. She avoided the government record keeping. That was the whole point.
And to your point, here's Jack Gillum at the Associated Press noting that it is very uncommon for either one person or a small group of people to host their own server, and there's a host of issues raised here by not using that State Department address. Here he is.
There are still questions about who used this email server. Was it part of other Clinton operations? Whatever it was, we know what it wasn't, and that was not a government-owned email address run on government servers with protections by the State Department and their IT operations and federal computing standards.
Andrew, what he said in there, other Clinton operations, it would seem to be that that's really where this is going to go. What else? I mean, somebody said, oh, don't worry about it. If you find all those emails, all you're going to find is wedding plans that she was talking about. But you have to then start looking at other Clinton operations, because let's not forget, there is a huge discussion right now about foreign donations to the Clinton Foundation. So this has a tremendous amount of legs here.
Yeah, the Clinton Global Initiative, and, they may do some very good work, but certainly part of it is a cash shakedown operation. and it's been fabulously successful at collecting tens of millions of dollars from governments overseas that have business with the United States. So it's very shady in terms of conflicts of interest and the like. That business was also carried on over this email system that the Clintons set up. So that's a very serious problem. And I think another very serious problem of the many is that we don't really know what vulnerabilities there were to the system. It seems that it could easily have been hacked by foreign actors. And it probably will never be able to get to the bottom of it because the system allowed her to erase things without a trace. So we have to take her word for it, for the fact that whatever she says is on it is all that was on it.
All right, I got about a minute and a half left. Going to play the other side of the coin here. People who will say, come on, guys, stop. This is just as bad as Benghazi. You're just a bunch of partisan Republicans, and all you want to do is find some way to go after the Clintons right now and stop her running for office. You've worked on the legal side of things. What do you say to those people?
Well, first of all, I think Benghazi is still a very serious issue, and obviously Congress thought it was serious enough to set up another committee, and now we know that the prior investigations didn't have the benefit of any communications Mrs. Clinton had. So I wouldn't poo-poo Benghazi. But I think the relevance of all this is not so much what laws may technically or been violated and what their technical defenses are. It kind of reminds us of what it's like to deal with the Clintons and asks us, is this really something we want to go through for another 4 or 8 years? It's one thing to say that we're not going to challenge a president who's in power, no matter how rogue he gets. It's quite a different thing to say, I just don't want to go through that again.
Andrew, I only got a few seconds left here. This investigation is going to go on now. Isn't it fair to say that this may go on well into campaign season? So this could indeed be hanging over her head almost right up until the election itself if she chooses to still run.
Yeah, it depends on what other issues come up. We tend to chase the next shiny object, so we'll just have to see what happens.
And we all know how long it takes for investigations sometime. You say they're going to happen like that, but they take weeks, months, and then years. Next thing you know, you're still at Benghazi years later. Andrew McCarthy, right. Always a pleasure to have you on the show, and always a pleasure to get the real story here. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Pleasure. Take care. All right, next up, a new jobs report. A stress test for banks, which obviously, if you're a consumer, you're going to want to hear about. And let's throw some fruit at AT&T. As a matter of fact, if you get a chance, throw an apple at AT&T today. That's coming up next. Bulls, Bears, and Bucks right here on MidPoint.